Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Crime and Entertainment. Now, we have here today a very interesting guest. He was a cop in the NYPD, I think, for 20 years, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then now he's got a number of books out, a lot of good stuff here. NYPD Through the Looking Glass, NYPD Law and Disorder, NYPD Flying Circus, Dickheads and Debauchery, Grand Theft Auto, and Confessions of a Catholic High School Graduate. Please welcome to the show, Vic Ferrari. Vic, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on your show. I greatly appreciate it.
Hey, man, it's not a problem at all. Now, look here. In doing this, especially if you're going to be a writer or even a cop or whatever in life, I think it helps. You have a leg up if you have a cool sounding name. And damn if you don't just hit that right out of the park. Vic Ferrari. And then what makes this even cooler is we'll get into, you becoming a cop, but you worked in the Grand Theft Auto department. I mean, that's got to be just like a match made in heaven.
It was, and I grew up in a neighborhood where stealing a car was a rite of passage. I worked in a gas station as a teenager, and guys would come in with stolen cars all the time and trying to sell the car, trying to sell the parts, trying to get the mechanics to do things on the cars. So I had a leg up when I went into the NYPD as far as I was always the guy getting involved in car chases and picking off stolen cars because I saw so much as a kid. I knew
Yeah.
what to look for as a cop.
So what area in New York did you grow up in?
I grew up in the Bronx,
The
born
Bronx.
and raised.
Okay. So was there a lot of, like, we've had a lot of mobsters on this show. A lot of mob guys, or former mob guys, I should say. Most of them now are out of the life or retired or either went and cooperated, done their time, paid their debt to society, and then now are trying to right the wrongs as best they can through podcasts like this and books. Was there a lot of mob activity when you were coming up that you knew of?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, my neighborhood was half Irish, half Italian, and I say with the mafia sprinkled in. Yeah, you had the social clubs where they hung out. There's a story in my book, Catholic Confessions of a Catholic High School Graduate. I unknowingly walked into a mob bar. I thought it was a bar, regular bar, trying to sell raffle tickets. And these guys were just throwing money at me and telling me to get the fuck out of there. And I'm like, yeah, but you got to fill out these tabs. And the bartender told me, Ronald fucking Reagan, get out of here, kid. So and my dad worked for a meat packing place. My dad was a butcher. He worked in a meat packing place that was mob owned. I didn't know this. And between the ages of 11 and 14, I used to go with him on Sundays and make chopped meat and sausage. I mean, I was a kid. This is before nowadays, like, there's all these safety regulations. And it was a large place and it was mob controlled. And what happens is when mobsters get out of jail, they got to show a W-2 form, for
Yeah,
their,
for a
for their parole
legitimate
or
job.
probation.
Yeah.
Right. So what they would do is they gave them a job, but these guys weren't butchers. They were like, what would you call it? Like store security.
Yeah.
So one day I'm going upstairs to the second floor and you had these concrete stairs and this guy comes rolling down the fucking concrete stairs like bouncing. And the guy's screaming, help, help. He's all broken up in the fetal position, like he's got broken bones and his mouth is blue. And coming down the stairs are two of these big Italian guys. I don't remember their names. Let's just say Carmine and Anthony. They're coming down the stairs and they go, and I'm just standing there. I'm a kid. I'm like 13 years old. I'm like, oh, Vic, don't worry about him. He's an old friend of ours. I'm saying as a friend. The guy's like, help me, help me. And they dragged his ass out and they threw him in front of the place like a pile of garbage, right? So I go up to my dad who's cutting steaks in the back and I go, Dad, Carmine and Anthony just threw this fucking guy down a flight of stairs. I go, what's going on? He goes, don't worry about that. I'll find out what's going on. Just go back to work. Mind your business. I said, all right, Dad. On the ride home, I bring it up again. I'm like, Dad, what happened? Why did they throw this guy downstairs? He goes, some people never learn their lesson. I go, what do you mean? He goes, that guy's a shoplifter. They caught him once before. They gave him a beating. Today, he snuck back in. He tried shoving a slab of ribs down his pants. He goes, they brought him upstairs. They put his hands in a vise and they broke his hands. They kicked his ass. And he started crying. He wanted a drink of water, so they poured paint down his throat and threw him down the stairs.
Oh,
So, yeah, it was. They didn't fuck around there with shoplifters. So that was the last day I worked there because my dad said, you've been coming to work with me 3-4 years now. You're starting to see what goes on around here. I don't want you making friends with these people or kind of falling into this life.
right.
You're done. And that was it. That was the last time my dad ever took me into work with him.
Were these Gambino hangouts, or you know the
Yeah,
family?
you hit the right family.
Well, meatpacking. I figured that was Paul Castellano territory there,
That's very good.
yeah, oh yeah,
You do your homework.
oh yeah. I try. We've interviewed a lot of guys through there, and a lot of cops too. We've had a lot of cops on the show. We had Giovanni Rocco, who infiltrated the decavs, the
Cavalcantes out in New Jersey.
Yeah. So a lot of different backgrounds that we have on this show. So I figured meatpacking probably was a Gambino or Castellano
you got the right family.
territory. Okay. Matter of fact, did you know Anthony Ruggiano or Fat Andy?
No, but I watch his son's podcast all the time. I love him.
Oh yeah. Anthony, me and Anthony are good friends. We actually do a show together about gambling. It's called The Better and the Bookmaker because he used to be a bookmaker.
Yeah. I watch his show all the time. Tell him I said hi. I don't know him, but I watch his podcast every night.
Okay. You're in Florida now, right?
Yeah. I retired.
Okay.
All right.
Well, cool. That's cool, man. So after that, is that kind of, what? Because everybody always says up there in New York, you either become a criminal, a firefighter, or a cop. There's really nothing else. I mean, most guys that I talk to, obviously there's different professions, but it's like you're one of those three.
That's a very good observation. Yeah, my neighborhood, my neighborhood was Irish and Italians, and you're right. It was either the civil service route, which is, fire department, police department, or one of the utility companies, Con Ed or the phone company. There was very few that went to college. I mean, guys did go to college, but not like nowadays. And then you had the guys that hung around the neighborhood and slowly but surely got sucked into that life.
Yeah. So what kind of drove you to the cop route?
When I was a little boy, my mother used to take me to the movie theater on Saturdays to watch, like the matinees. So we're going to see Herbie the Love Bug, Part 3 or whatever the hell it was. And around the corner from the movie theater was a police station. So I used to run up to the police cars and stick my face in the glass and look at the nightsticks and stuff. I'd watch how the cops interacted in front of the station house. Every little boy is drawn to that gun. I'd watch the cops as they have their hands on the butt of their guns. So I knew I wanted to be a cop by age 5. By age 10, my friends and I used to sneak into the post office and steal the FBI's most wanted posters. And we'd be walking around the neighborhood with a wanted poster some guy wanted in Arkansas. And we go into the local deli and look at this motherfucker. It looks just like him. You know what I mean? We would have gotten our asses handed to us. But I knew what I wanted to do since I was a little boy. So by 20, I took the police exam. And by 21, I was in the police academy along my way.
21. Now, I've heard you say in multiple podcasts, and I've heard other cops say this too, when they bring you guys in, it's by the fucking truckloads almost. It's a lot of people in at one time. That was the case when you come in, a lot of cops initiated?
Yeah. So the New York City Police Department at any given time has between 35 and 40,000 members. So that's a good attendance at Yankee Stadium.
Yeah.
We hire in bulk. So a police academy class can be anywhere from 500 to 2,500. So I was in a mid-sized class. My graduating class was 1,200 people.
Wow. Yeah, there's another former cop that I've talked to, and I hadn't had a chance to have him on the show yet, but he's coming. We're trying to do an end podcast sit down for that one. But have you ever heard of Michael Dowd?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I know, guys. It's funny you bring him up. I don't know him personally. He got jammed up in the NYPD. When you get in trouble, we call it jammed up as opposed to trouble. Oh, yeah. He got jammed up. Probably I had 5 or 6 years in, but I mean, that was a big fucking deal. I know a couple of guys that worked with him, and they said that, it was fairly obvious back then that he was, up to no good.
Yeah, he used to drive a goddamn Corvette to the fucking police station and park in the fucking lieutenant's chief's parking spot. I mean,
I don't know if this story is true, but after he got grabbed, they put him on modified assignment, which means he was still getting a check. This is what I was told.
Right.
And they sent him out to the Whitestone Pound out in Queens.
Yeah.
And he would park his car on the other side of the Grand Central Parkway. I think that's what it's called, the Grand Central Parkway. So they couldn't tail him. So he would come out of the pound knowing IEB was following him and run across 8 lanes of traffic so they couldn't follow him. I don't know if that's true, and I don't know if he worked at the Whitestone Pound. I don't want to be called a liar, but that's what the guys at the pound told me.
Yeah. I know for a period of time he did get moved out somewhere, but I think that was really before he got into a lot of his shit. But yeah, his documentary, The 7-5, have you ever seen that?
Oh yeah, I've watched multiple times. Very well done.
That's what I was gonna say. When it comes to documentaries, there's only so many that I have interest or a need or desire to watch again. You know what I'm saying? Because most
Oh,
of
I
them
could watch that.
get the
Yeah,
pitch.
that's one of those things. If it's on, I'm gonna watch it again.
Yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
was gonna say. It don't matter how many times you watch it. That thing is so well done, and even though you know how it's gonna play out, you know what happens. It's just so well done that it's just like one of them that has a very high rewatchability factor.
Well, there's so much going on in there because Dowd, I mean, is a great storyteller. I mean,
Yes.
whatever you want to think about the guy, he did his time. I mean, I know a lot of cops can't move past that. It's not like I'd have him come over my house and stay, but at the same time, he's entertaining. The guy knows how to tell a story. The guy could have probably been a stand-up comedian or gone into the entertainment industry had he not, and that probably would have been better for him than getting involved in law enforcement. But yeah, I mean, he's an entertaining storyteller.
Oh, very much so. I think there's a word. I think they call it like raconteur or something like
Yes,
that. But
Raconteur, yes.
yeah, raconteur. He's very good at that, and he talks with his hands. I mean, he's very good at laying it out for you. And I heard you were telling a story in one of your podcasts, and it kind of made me click back to that where you were talking about. I forgot the specific situation, but basically it was going to get you a lot of overtime. I think it was the deal with the grenade or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the NYPD, it's all about the overtime.
Right.
And yeah, it's the opening story in my book, Grand Theft Auto, the NYPD's auto crime division. It wasn't even our case. We were just doing a search warrant out in Queens. It was like a massive case, so multiple locations were getting hit. I was a Bronx guy. They just flew us in and gave us a package and said, do a search warrant in this location. And we're in this mobster's, salvage yard out in Queens. And my partner finds a grenade in a shoebox, and he's walking around with this thing. And he's like, oh, pineapple grenade, Vietnam era. I'm going to throw this in Jamaica Bay. And I'm like, well, first of all, you were a fucking cook in the fucking army. It's not like he was a demolitions expert or a Navy SEAL, right? And I says, if you put that back, I like talk like a child. I go, if you put that back and we call the lieutenant, he's going to call the bomb squad. We're going to pull out of here and we're going to make mega overtime. They're going to come with all their toys and play with this fucking thing. And he goes, all right. And and the funny thing is, had he thrown that grenade in Jamaica Bay, that whole neighborhood was mobbed up. No one would have called the police or complained about it. Yeah. And the next thing you know, we're 200 or 400 feet back from this place. The bomb squad shows up. The bomb squad detective is in that fucking anteater costume. He looks like he's walking on the surface of the moon. He comes out with the shoebox and they put it in this. The bomb squad's got like this thing that looks like a massive beehive. Yeah. And it's all like metal weaving. So basically, if the explosive goes off, the air goes through, but the particles won't.
The shrapnel won't go
multiple
through.
Layers of screens.
Yeah.
And they took the fucking thing off. They took it out to Rodman's Neck in the Bronx and they detonated it. It was a live grenade. But you're right. It's all about like Dad was talking about, it's all about the overtime.
Yeah. And that was what he was saying was the first time he, I think, kind of went that route it was like, I could do this. It's going to take a lot of overtime, or this guy could just leave me, $50, $100 or whatever it was. So the temptation, I think, for cops in general, not just, him, but I think when you have that job as a civil servant, that is something that's going to be there all the time. You make a bust that's got $100,000 sitting there. That's got to be so tempting to not want to take some of that. I would think. Now, I mean, I don't know. That's a lot of money.
It depends on the person. Okay. So here's the thing with the New York City Police Department. They make a lot of mistakes with a lot of things. I don't agree with a lot of their policies, but I will say this about them that's correct. From the day you're hired, they tell you you're going to be fired. In the police academy, they preach, don't take free meals. Don't buddy up with people that want to give you things. There's always going to be a quid pro quo with it. And they have prosecutors come in that are tasked with prosecuting police corruption that tell these horror stories about cops getting time. They bring in guys like Dowd and guys that got jammed up before, telling you could lose everything.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like you're like, oh, I wasn't sure, or I didn't think it'd be a big deal. I mean, it's up front on the table, and there's so many multiple layers of the internal affairs division. You have the field unit, you have the major case of internal affairs, you have inspections, you have civilian complaint review board. There's so many investigative arms of the NYPD tasked to root out police brutality and corruption that you're either an idiot or you went in with that mindset and you're going to do it. You know what I mean? There's a chapter in one of my books called Crossing Over to the Dark Side, and it's about a bunch of guys that I either knew or saw around that went bad. And it's like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Is it that they were bad to begin with and they were just waiting for the right opportunity, the right person, right partner that they know is going to go with them to do whatever they want? Or is it someone that falls into a situation financially, or they're bitter and they just say, fuck this, I'm just going to run this to and take it to its course and do as much, stealing or make as much money illegally as I can.
Yeah. There's a scene in Lethal Weapon 2 with Danny Glover and Mel Gibson where they're in like that cargo ship that's in the air, and I think there's like a van that's just full of money, like stack, or maybe it's the ship, I can't remember, but it's like fucking floor to ceiling $100 bills. And they tear open the plastic, and Danny Glover brings it out, and he's like, look at this shit, Riggs. He's like, this is enough money to send my kids to college right here. And he's like, take it, do something good with it. And he's like, no, it's drug money. And then he throws it up in the air. I think later on they wind up driving the whole damn van out of the cargo ship and letting all the money just fly everywhere. And that was the diplomatic guy that was.
Oh yeah,
that
yeah,
was
yeah,
like
yeah.
we'll get into a diplomatic story you've got a little bit later on too. That's pretty funny. But to get back here, did you start with Grand Theft Auto, the auto theft division, or was you somewhere else when you first
Oh
started?
no. I started in field training. So as a rookie cop back then, things have changed, but back then we had field training units. So when I was hired in the 80s, they would stick you in a precinct with 40 or 50 other rookies, and you'd be in a field training unit that would cover 4 different precincts in a zone. And you'd come into work and your sergeant would give you an assignment. And usually it was a foot post in the middle of nowhere. I mean, I was in the South Bronx, so I remember like my first couple of days I was on Fulton Avenue, and there was 6-story burnt out abandoned buildings as far as the eye could see, and they dropped you off and said, figure it out. And if you had a question, you called the sergeant. If you did that too much, he would say, I don't bother you. Why do you keep fucking bothering me? Figure it out. And then maybe once or twice a month, you would get in a car with another rookie with the sergeant, and you would go on different calls, and the sergeant would guide you. But a lot of the learning, you had to do it on your own. It's changed a lot now. Nowadays, they pack 8 rookies in a van with a sergeant, and they go driving around looking for summonses. There's a guy taking a piss in an alleyway. Everybody gets out of the car to stretch their legs. The sergeant instructs the rookie now it's kind of spoon-fed, and it's more wrapped around the summonses aspect of it. But when I was new, you were just told to figure it out.
Yeah. No, that's fine. New York is, or at least Manhattan, it's hard to find a place to take a piss up there. I was just up there recently, and I had to go into a damn Taco Bell, and they made you buy something before they would let you in the bathroom. You had to get a code to get in the bathroom.
Well, that's because you got a lot of homeless people
Yeah.
there that basically set up shop. They're begging out front when they got to go to the bathroom. That's why they put locks on it and stuff, because they don't want them to ruin it.
I was like, holy cow, I got to buy a damn taco, which, I mean, it ain't the worst thing in the world to have to use the bathroom, but still.
But after field training, I went to a precinct. I was in a radio call for a couple of years, just answering calls. Out of my 20 years with the New York City Police Department, 15, I was in plainclothes, more or less. I worked in the Manhattan North Narcotics Division. I wasn't an undercover. I was an investigator, but I did buy drugs a handful of times and did minor undercover work. I wasn't like deep undercover, anything like that. And then my last 10, I was a detective in the auto crime division, which was anything with chop shops, body shops, exporting stolen cars out of the country, garden variety car thieves, and sophisticated organized crews.
Now are you running into some mob territory there? Because I would think that would probably be a big deal with the stolen cars, chop shops, and things like that.
Yeah, a little. See, the auto crime division is 120 detectives. I was in a satellite office in the Bronx. There were a couple of mobbed up places in the Bronx, but as far as the mob was concerned, the mob body shops, salvage yards were Queens and Brooklyn. But we did get pulled out there to supplement them on cases.
Right. Okay.
But I did rub elbows with some of the mobsters, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, I was just curious because I know there there's kind of a loose storyline in The Sopranos to where they're stealing cars in the U.S., but then they're transporting them overseas, I guess to Italy, I'm assuming,
Yeah.
and they're paying like three times as much. I didn't know if that was legitimate. Like, is that really how it goes, or
I'll tell you a wild story.
yeah?
I worked on a case, was out of our office with the Westchester County DA's office, and this is going to sound like something out of a movie. You had a Chinese military intelligence officer that settled in Brooklyn. He meets up with a Jamaican middleman that knows all these car thieves. So the Chinese guy pays the Jamaican 5,000 a car. The Jamaican has a couple of guys that run steel crews. The car thieves are paid anywhere between $500 and $1,000 for a car. The orders were Audi A6s, silver and black. So they were stealing up to 30 cars a month. The cars would get stolen. They would get parked somewhere to cool off. Then the cars would get driven out to Brooklyn. The Chinese had rented a warehouse on Metropolitan Avenue, just over the border in Brooklyn from Queens. They bring in a couple of cars at a time. Inside the warehouse, you had Chinese nationals. So what they would do is they would put 2 cars per container. They'd let the air out of the tires so the car would sit low. Then they'd build a platform above it and drive another 1 or 2 cars above it so they get 3, 4 cars per container, right? Once those containers were filled, they locked them up. They had a trucking company come that had nothing to do with this. The trucking company was taking the cars out to Newark, New Jersey. From Newark, the containers were put on trains and railed across the United States to Long Beach, California, where they were put on cargo ships and shipped out to Shanghai. So we were wondering why they had to be Audis and why they had to be silver and black. We later found out it was for government officials. So this case got so big, we had Chinese cops on wiretaps listening in Mandarin and Cantonese. We had Spanish detectives listening in because a lot of our car thieves were Spanish, listening to their phone conversation. So in addition to this international car theft ring, it became apparent that our thieves were also in the murder for hire business. So a couple of these guys were doing hits for money. And when we took the case down, we probably solved about 15 homicides in addition to rounding everybody up in this international car theft ring.
Holy shit! Now is that well? What about the value of the cars? Are they just like 2 or 3 times the value once they get over there? I know you're saying that particular case that was kind of for officials, but is like the price of a car here really double and triple over there?
Well, I think it boils down to access to the car. Like probably in Shanghai at the time, there wasn't an Audi dealership.
Right,
That's one. Two, there's probably something where if you did buy a car, they're legit. There's a tariff on it.
right, okay.
So they're getting around that, and plus it's government officials, so they kind of run the system over there. So they're probably, I don't know but whoever was buying those cars over there were very well off.
Oh
But
yeah,
the funny thing is, one of the main thieves, when we took the whole case down, one of the main thieves, they're all sitting in jail, right? Trying to figure out, what happened, what went wrong. One of the main thieves, before he cooperated and flipped, he's sitting in jail with the Chinese guy, and the Chinese guy tells him, when this is over and you get out, he goes, I'll send you out to California. I got a brother out there doing the same thing. So this was when we reached out to several law enforcement agencies in California. We could never figure it out. But I mean, this was a big to do.
wow, that's crazy. Now, correct me if I'm wrong here. I think I heard you say in New York you're actually not allowed to do like a car chase.
Okay, I'm retired 15 years. I can tell you during my 20 years.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. We're going off your time now. Thank
Yeah, the dirty little secret is you're not allowed to get involved in car chases, especially with stolen cars, right? But everybody does it.
right.
As long as no civilians are hurt, you don't crash the police car, and the bad guy isn't like a paraplegic. You know what I mean? He doesn't get too fucked up if he crashes. No one's gonna hurt you. You know what I mean? Like, and they'll call off the rate because what'll happen is first the duty captain will come over the air and go, "Is that unit in pursuit?" And you say, "No, we're just following," but you can hear the sirens in the background. Everybody knows by the distance you're covering, you're going 100 miles an hour. Then the duty captain will come over the air and try to terminate the pursuit. And I never agreed with this, but a lot of cops will start keying the microphone and it's called stepping. They'll start stepping on the duty captain so he can't be heard over the radio to terminate the pursuit. Once they terminate that pursuit and something goes wrong, they're going to cut your balls off.
Wow. Yeah, so you're telling me Die Hard 3 lied to me when Bruce Willis was driving that damn cab like that?
Oh, and if you get into a fucking, you wreck a radio car, forget it. It never ends. Then you got to go for driving requalification, and
Oh,
yeah, you're not commandeering cars. You don't get like two strikes. You know what I mean?
so how long were you in the auto theft?
I was in the auto crime division 10 years.
10 years. So, like, what was kind of your, like, wildest story while you were in the auto division? What's, like, the top one you remember?
I mean, I a couple of times went out in the middle of the night with a team and stole a car, and we took it to a secret location and installed hardwired. This is before, technology. Now you could just slap something on a car. I mean, I stole a couple of cars in the middle of the night. We brought it to a garage. They took the dashboard out, hardwired a GPS and a listening device. We had a warrant for it. Returned the car like within an hour. I thought that was actually pretty impressive the way we had that all set up.
So y'all would go out and actually steal before. This is obviously, like you said before. Now you can anybody can almost buy like a tracing device with a
Right.
magnet case and just slap it up under a bumper walking by in a parking lot. But y'all would actually go steal the whole car, install it, then drop it back off without nobody being the wiser.
Yeah. Yeah, we
Wow.
had we had a car just like it to take the parking spot for the hour or so we were gone.
Oh wow, that's fucking genius.
Well, think about it. If you come back and someone took the fucking spot,
Yeah,
the guy's not retarded. Now the car's around the block or
yeah, I
across
could
the
have swore
street
I
or wait a
parked
minute.
2 spots away from it. Wow,
Yeah,
that's
no, the
ingenious.
auto crime division was great. I got a story in one of my books. We recovered Mike Tyson's stolen Ducati. Yeah, you know what I mean. Like, I was involved in a lot of wild shit.
So after the auto theft, where'd you go then?
I retired. I retired out of
Retired
auto
after
crime.
that. Yes, because you've done 20 years, right?
Mhm.
What had you just kind of been collecting these stories over time? Because I know you said people kind of told you like you got all these crazy stories, you should write them down. Is that kind of how it went to where you would get into
Yeah, but
writing
I
other
didn't
books?
write them down. Here's the thing. I retired. I was bored out of my mind, and friends and family said, you got all these wild stories. It's like you should really like just start writing them down and write a book. And I was very apprehensive because I said, if I'm going to do this, I don't want to get anybody divorced and I don't want to get anybody in trouble or embarrassed. So my books, I'm big as far as I change the precincts, the dates, the ranks. I might move a character from a guy that I knew and put him in a story. It's all kind of loosely based, but there is something to each story. I just
Right.
don't, like you watch at the end of a television show or Law and Order, it says
Yeah.
no person depicted because I don't want to embarrass anybody.
Right, I got you. So was the first book that you wrote, was that the Dickheads and Debauchery or whatever it was?
Yeah, Dickheads and Debauchery and Other Ingenious Ways. That's not NYPD based. That's just a
Right.
comedy on the ridiculous things people do to shorten their life expectancy, like running with the bulls in Spain, going to Times Square during New Year's Eve, going to Disney World when you're obese, eating a bitch beater, one of them big turkey legs.
Nah, I like some turkey legs
I
now.
like turkey legs, but you can't have too many.
And that's one place that I mean, I've been to New York a lot of times here in this last few years. We've had a lot of stuff going on with the podcast down there, but I want to go for Times Square just to say I experienced it.
Listen, my friend. I did that 17 out of 20 years. When you watch on television from above and they show all those people packed in, they're packed in like cattle. They're in wooden pens, right? And there's no place to go to the bathroom. You're in the theater district. All those restaurants have had their bathrooms trashed before, so that you're not getting in. And there's people pissing on each other, shitting on each other, throwing up on each other. I've seen people change tampons in the crowd. And then after the ball is dropped, right, and all the pandemonium, everybody's drunk and fucked up. You get all the hood rats from Brooklyn, the Bronx, Harlem. They're sober as a judge, and it's like watching the Animal Channel. They're just like hyenas. They're just kind of waiting off in the shadows because they know you got to leave, and they know more than likely you're getting on that fucking train or you're going, down looking for your car at the other end of the city. And people come running up with knots on their head. Someone took my iPhone. Someone took my camera because they're watching you.
Yeah. Oh, it's I went once in June and then again back in August, and I try not to get on the subways if I don't absolutely have to. I mean, a lot of people, I still see a lot of people use them, but I mean, it's getting bad. I mean, it's always been bad, but it's getting a lot worse nowadays, especially.
Yeah, it was bad when I first got hired, and then Giuliani came in, and he let us clean up the city, and now unfortunately, from what it looks like, it's gone back to the good old bad days.
Yeah, I mean, and don't get me wrong. I mean, I don't want to scare people from going down there. I personally haven't had a bad experience, but it's kind of like you don't want to hang out in one spot too long. You don't want to make it obvious that you're a tourist. At least pretend you know what the fuck you're doing.
They'll
I'll even,
size you up in seconds.
yeah, yeah. Even if I'm not sure, I'll get on a fucking train and bring out my phone and figure out if I'm going the right way or not, just so I'm not standing on a platform looking around like this. If I'm on the wrong train, then you know the next one that stops, then I'll get off and get on the other one. At least make it appear that you kind of know what you're doing. Because if you're down there with people with maps and shit like that, I'm just like, you're just pretty much putting a target on your back.
Right. And if you're going to look at your phone in the train or somewhere, get your back against something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Get your back up against the wall, because you don't want two hands getting on your shoulder blades and throwing you onto the fucking tracks. And it happens.
Yeah, that'd probably be like, I don't know. There's a lot of bad ways to die, but that'd definitely be one of them, getting hit by one of them fucking trains.
Well, the homeless, you got a lot of homeless that live in the subway. And sometimes they'll take a piss in the subway and they'll piss on the third rail by accident, and they fucking blow off their dick and get electrocuted pissing on the third rail down in the subway.
Oh, holy shit. I've never heard of that.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if I've seen that one on 1,000 Ways to Die.
Happened.
Wow. So, I mean, and you had, I don't know if that was in your book. I remember a lot of your stories because I've kind of been listening to a lot of your stuff today, but you said one of the, I don't know if it was a lady, I think you said you worked with, failed a drug test from an interesting way. She got pop positive for cocaine.
Yeah, I didn't work with, I didn't work with her, but so the New York City Police Department has a zero tolerance with drugs, and rightfully so.
Yeah.
And you get tested 3 times before you come off probation, and then they have random drug tests, and basically they run your social security number, your tax number in a hopper, and like I think it's 20 or 25 people every day randomly get called down to health services, and you got to piss in a cup. Nowadays they pull hair, but back then it was urine. And the only person that I know of was this female cop that worked in the Bronx. I didn't know her, but I know of her. I know people that know her. The story is she tested positive for cocaine, and she said they were ready to fire, and she goes, time out. I don't do coke. My boyfriend does, and he enjoys fellatio. I gave him a blowjob. I swallowed, and that's why I tested positive for cocaine. And supposedly they gave her a pass.
Get the fuck out of here. No more blowjobs for her.
It worked. Whether the story's true or not, it worked.
Now, I actually worked for a long period of time. I worked for a company, a steel company called Nucor Steel. And it's one of the bigger steel companies in the world. And they had a strict no drug policy as well. You would get randomed out there. Now, I don't know if the NYPDs are like this, but if you went to them and told them you had a problem, that was different. Like if you said, hey, I've become addicted to this or that, they would send you to treatment for it to get you help. Now then, after that treatment, obviously, if you fail it, that's only going to go so far. Once you do that treatment, and if you mess up again, then yeah, it's kind of, we helped you once, but it's out the door. But if you didn't tell them anything and you get pop positive with a random, you're out the door. Anytime, if you ever had an incident, like if you bump something with a forklift or drop something, anything incident-wise, you automatically, that was just standard protocol, you had to go take a drug test. So it was a pretty strict policy out there. And there was this one guy that said he used to put cocaine in his wife's area and lick it out. But he's like, I never snorted. And that was his story. But he didn't get off quite as lucky as the woman in your book. They did give him his walking papers.
Yeah, if you showed up to work in an NYPD precinct and said, I got a drug problem, they'll show you the door. The first thing they're going to do is drag you out to health services and test you, and you're done. You'll be fired in 15 minutes.
Wow. Now how was their testing policy back in those days? Like, did you have somebody watching you? Because the first place I ever went when they drug tested, I was a welder and I worked second shift. So we would go in at like 3 o'clock, and there was a gas station near the company where we'd work at. So everybody would pull in there and kind of get their, candy bar, drink or whatever before they're going in, energy drink or whatever the case. And I pulled in one day and I noticed like there was no fucking where to park. Like parking lots were full, gas pumps were full. I was like, what the hell is going on? Well, word had gotten out that they were doing a plant-wide drug test from first shift. I guess those
Oh,
guys
okay.
called the second shift. So everybody was like, well, they're doing a plant-wide drug test. And I'm like, well, I don't worry about that. Like, I don't do drugs, so I'm good to go. I was like, do you think if the whole fucking shift calls out, they're not going to think that's a little funny and maybe get you tomorrow? Like, I mean, what are you going to do here? And we wound up going in, and I think they actually did get rid of a lot of people, but that was how that word traveled. But they had, even if it was a random, they had people that would like store piss and lockers and stuff to try to fool the system.
Yeah. So like when you get hired, right? They take you out to health services, and like I said, we hire, in bulk. So the day I got drug tested the first time, I'm in a suit and tie. I didn't even get hired yet. They called like 100 of us down to health services. They're doing X-rays and all sorts of testing. So now it's time for the drug test. They bring the guys into one huge like conference room. They take the girls in another room, and like I said, there was about 100 of us that day, and they're bringing us into the men's room 10 at a time. And the way they had it set up is there's like 5 or 10 urinals. I forget, it's so many years ago. You step up to the plate, and there's a supervisor standing right over your shoulder. Like, in the NFL, like they're going to block a kick, there's one guy right on the other guy's back,
Yeah.
right? I'm standing there, and I look up, and there's a mirror at a 45-degree angle tilted. So if he can't look over my shoulder, he can see the mirror and see my cock taking a piss. And I've always been gun shy. I don't like pissing in front of people. And I'm standing there trying to push something out. And there's people coming and going with cups of gold. And the guy is just looking at me, and I'm like, oh, fuck. And I'm pushing, pushing, pushing. I let out a fart right in the guy's crotch. And the guy goes, you want to hurry up? And I said, listen, I'm 21 years old. I was fucking mortified. I'm like, I'm sorry. So he pulls me out. And another guy, if you talk to Dowd, ask him about Skippy. Skippy was this old time cop that worked in the health service division that used to abuse people and call everybody Skippy. He goes, come here, kid. He goes, do you drink coffee? I said, no, sir. He goes, you do now. Drink a couple of cups of coffee. And finally, I was able to piss. But I got random drug tested in 20 years. I don't know, 5, 6, 7 times. And every time it took me an hour or two because it just was so uncomfortable with a grown man standing over my shoulder. It's like a fucking prison movie. I'm trying to take a piss in a cup. Ask any NYPD guy, they'll tell you the same thing.
That's crazy. And that was how it was out there too. They said they would random people, but it's like once they found their 3 guys that they knew I think they could count on to pass, that was their random 3 people every single time. Like they would pick, and I think they did that because they knew they didn't have to worry about them popping, and if they'd done anybody else, it was like a 50-50 shot, and they didn't want to lose any manpower. So it's like every couple of months, hey, you got random, but it's the same fucking people every time.
Yeah, well, one of the reasons they're so paranoid with the mirror and somebody standing on your shoulder, they've caught people with prosthetic penises. I heard a story about a guy, he had a French's mustard bottle with urine in it, taped under his armpit, with a tube running out to come out of his pants to fill up the tube. So when he squeezed, it would come out. It's funny. I got drug tested to get hired, and then it went years before I got drug tested again. And I got tested the most, like my last 3 years. And all the senior guys used to say the same thing. It's a little odd that they're testing guys that got a pension coming up.
Yeah, got a pension coming to get rid of that
You
pension.
know what I mean? But I never did drugs. I don't do drugs, so I never really gave it a second thought. It was just uncomfortable for me.
Yeah, the second steel company that I worked at, the big one, I got I had never, from the day that I hired that company, I was with them almost 12 years. I never had a drug test other than my original drug test when I first got hired. And then they was like, hey, you got random. This was on day shift. We would rotate nights to days. So I went, took the test, come back. Next week on nights, hey, you got random. I was like, shit, I just got random like last week. You sure you ain't reading off the same papers? Nah, it happens like that sometimes. All right. So I go take it, come back. The following week, I'm back on days. Hey, you got random. The nurse actually sent me back because she said there was some kind of law they can only do it twice inside of a month. I don't know if that's everywhere or not, but she was like, hadn't you already been here? I was like, yeah, I've been here every fucking week, basically. And she's like, go back. She said, by law, we can't do it more than twice in 30 days. I was like, well, it don't matter. I'll do it. But, if I don't want to, get y'all in trouble. But yeah, that seems kind of suspect. It's almost like they're trying to drive people away that's real close to getting that pension.
Maybe. I mean, it just seemed like a coincidence to us.
Yeah. You've got some more funny stories, man. There was one you told about some nuns and a stolen car. I kind of got a kick out of that one.
Yeah, early in my career, my part, it was a Saturday. It was like this time of year. It was nice weather out. And there was two young, attractive females dressed as nuns standing on Broadway, and they flagged us down. I thought it was, you had two colleges in that precinct, the College of Mount St. Vincent and what's the other one? Manhattan College. And we had a lot of fraternities and sororities, and it was, college kids trying to get into a fraternity or sorority, doing stupid shit,
Yeah.
running into a diner naked, stealing a salt and pepper shaker, kid shit. So I thought it was a joke. And you got these two young women that are nuns that they're all upset and they're wringing their hands. And basically, the story they tell me is they came from Westchester County to do a little shopping. They parked in this pizzeria parking lot. They didn't realize that they could be towed. They went shopping. When they came back, the car got towed. They went to a tow lot, and tow lots are, they don't give a shit. The guy wanted $100 or he's going to keep the car. And I said, well, don't you have $100? She said, this is before ATMs and stuff. She goes, no, I don't. And then, she's like, it's not our car. So finally I was able to get it out of her. They stole the car. Mother Superior went away on a retreat somewhere.
So the
nuns took Mother Superior's car, came down to the Bronx, thought they'd do a little shopping and take the car back, and no harm, no foul. So I said, they said they talked to the tow guy. He's not letting that car out without $100. So I threw them in the radio car. I drove to the precinct. I went into my locker. I didn't have an ATM card at that time. I got $100 out, went to the tow lot, got their car out, and she says, I'll pay you back. I'll pay you back. And I said, all right. Gave her my phone number. And you know how it is. When you lend somebody money, it's a pain in the ass to get it back, even with a nun. So at the time, I was in my early 20s. I was still living at home. And I come home one day, and my father goes, Sister Samantha called? And I said, yeah, all right. All right, you got the number? And he goes, yeah. And he goes, Sister Samantha. And I went, yeah. And he said it again. I go, she's a nun. And he goes, oh, I don't care who you date. Wait, a nun? A nun is calling here? I said, Dad, I'll explain it to you another time. So I call this nun, and it's all this cloak and dagger shit. Like, I'm leaving messages for her at the convent. She's calling me back. Finally, we set up a meeting in a park a couple of blocks away from the convent. And I'm sitting on a park bench. It's like a spy movie. She's in her, habit and everything. She comes over with an envelope, gives me $100. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I mean, she was a young woman. Like, she was a couple of years older than me. Like, I don't know, I was like 21, 22. She was like 26, 27. And I go, I said, are you happy with the choice you made? I mean, you're a young woman to become a nun. She goes, are you happy with the choice you made? I said, yeah, I'm happy to be a cop. I'm having the time of my life. She goes, I'm enjoying myself too. And that was it. I never saw her again.
Holy cow. Now, there's another one about a guy. I forgot the guy's name. I think, what do you call him? Diablo?
El Diablo, yes.
El Diablo. Now, this seems like a story that I would hear, or a scene that would be in a movie where somebody stole the horse and carriage.
Yeah, El Diablo was an Irish cop, but the Spanish cops in the precinct called him El Diablo, the devil, because if you worked with him, he was such a partier, and he was like one of these guys. He would get drunk and just do these outrageous things, and he never got in trouble. We used to say anyone else would have gotten fired already. It was like he had the fucking Prince of Darkness running interference for him. And if you worked with him, you either went to rehab. We call it the farm. So if you have a drinking problem, they send you upstate to rehab. They call it the farm. You got divorced, or you converted to Christianity, because those were, if you work with this guy, it was like inevitable you were going to wind up in a bar. So anyway, he's drinking in this midtown Manhattan bar with a couple of floozies, and over by Central Park, and one of these handsome cab operators, the guys that take you for a ride around Central Park. One of the guys comes in to use the bathroom, and he's wearing like the felt vest, and he's wearing a fucking top hat. El Diablo sizes him up immediately and says, hey, you mind if I take Seabiscuit for a ride? And the guy goes, yeah, sure. And the guy goes into the men's room. You can tell, come on, girls, he's a friend of mine. Let's go. Takes the two girls out, loads them in the back of the horse and carriage, moves the blocks, gives the horse a smack in the ass with the whip, and the horse starts moving. And at first, the horses clippity clop, and they're admiring Central Park, and then the horse realizes that there's an asshole behind the wheel. It's not Charlie. You know, El Diablo grew up in the fucking Bronx. He's not like he grew up in a farm in Ireland. He knows how to handle a horse. Now the horse says, fuck this. I'm cutting through Central Park to get some oats. So the horse starts picking up steam and starts going through red lights, and now they could get killed. The floozies in the back of the horse and carriage are like, let us out, let us out. And he can't stop. So the horse starts heading for Central Park to cut through to go to the west side. And what winds up happening is a couple of other handsome cab operators, the guy's friends, go, wait a minute, there goes Charlie's horse and carriage. It must be stolen. They give chase, right? So it goes into Central Park, and the way it was like a fucking chariot race in Ben-Hur. The way it was described to me, the way they were able to stop them was one got in front, one got in back, and they slowed it down, like, whoa.
Kind of like you do with a car chase. You try to sandwich them and box them in.
Yeah, with a horse and carriage. And they finally got him to stop. The two floozies run out into the park, never to be seen again. The two handsome cab operators start beating the shit out of El Diablo. He's trying to explain he's a cop, right? The other hand, they hold him. The other handsome cab operator shows up. He wants him arrested, right? El Diablo goes, take me to an ATM. I'll take out $500 right now. We'll call it square. And El Diablo, the guy said, all right. He went to an ATM, took out $500, and that was the end of it.
Oh, shit.
Nowadays, with cell phone cameras, and he'd have been
that would have never happened.
Yeah, no. You couldn't get away with that now.
I gotta believe somebody had to be like, I was just seeing these fucking 3 sets of horses and carriages just rolling down fucking Main Street here.
Can you imagine? We thought it was a bullshit story, and then somebody knew somebody that worked in the Central Park precinct that was there that kind of confirmed it. Because when El Diablo told the story, like, get the fuck out of here. And then somebody knew to know that really happened.
Well, I'm sorry, that was hilarious. There was another cool story you told about, I think it was a Benz that was, it was stolen, but how you got the guy I thought was just fucking genius, because when you spotted him, there was a woman with him that wasn't the woman that contacted you later.
Are you talking about the diplomat?
Yeah, the diplomat. Yeah.
So what happens is I get a phone call from the director of security at Mercedes-Benz in Lower Manhattan, and he says, "Listen, this car came in for service, and the VIN number doesn't compute. So Mercedes keeps really good records. They contact Deutschland over in Germany. Germany says, yeah, that VIN number is good, but that car was manufactured for France, and it was taken in a home invasion." So I said, all right. I says, is the guy still there? He goes, no, he's coming back on Thursday. I said, all right. I says, on Thursday morning, I'll pick him off. I don't want to get them involved in it. I go, I'll wait outside with my partner, give you the plate. I run the plate through 50 states, and the plate doesn't come back to anything. So I assumed that the Mercedes dealer got the wrong plate and VIN number. So, but I've got this plate. So first thing in the morning on Thursday, my partner and I are on the west side of Manhattan. We're outside the Mercedes dealership, and you got all these people lined up to bring their cars in to get service. And we see the car, but it's a diplomat plate. Now that changes things. You're not allowed to fuck with diplomats. They got diplomatic immunity. Yeah. So I watched them go into the dealership. My partner and I parked the car. We got out. We're watching them, and it's a guy. He looked like the bass player or the bass player for U2, that guy Adam Clayton. He had like the horn rim glasses, short hair, skinny jeans, probably in his mid-40s. He's with this really hot female chick who's wearing like really high boots and a chinchilla coat, and she looks like she's going to give birth in 15 minutes, right? And they're walking around the dealership looking at the cars. They leave, right? I run up to the security director. He takes me the car. I write down the VIN number and stuff. I said, listen, I don't know what I got here. I says, just fix the car, let him take it. Don't say a word. I says, I'll get to the bottom of this. So I go back to the office, and this is probably about 2003, 2004. It's after 9/11. The NYPD sent detectives all over the world to work with Interpol and different police agencies outside the country to stop terrorism before it comes into New York. Right. So we had an NYPD sergeant, a liaison, that was working in Paris, France. So there's a 5-hour time difference. This thing took forever to figure out, but I get a hold of this sergeant, and I said, listen, I need you to find out, is this car really stolen? How is it stolen? If it is stolen, Does the insurance company own it? Does a regular person own it? Like, could you find that out for me? In the meantime, I'm trying to figure out how it got stolen in France, how it got to the United States. Now I go through customs. I find out that the car came into the United States, not through France, from Cote d'Ivoire, which is a country in Africa next to Nigeria, where you have mine, diamond smuggling and shit. Supposedly, Cote d'Ivoire makes Nigeria look like Disney World. They're always at war with each other. The car came to the United States from Cote d'Ivoire in a diplomatic container from the island of Vanuatu, which is an island in the South Pacific where they filmed a Survivor series. I'm like, what the fuck is with all these countries and all this shit? Long story short, I get involved with the State Department, and the State Department tells me, yeah, he's not a diplomat, but his wife is. And he shows me a photo of a woman, and it's a middle-aged woman. I go, that's not who I seen him with. He goes, well, that's his wife. She's a diplomat. He goes, you can't fuck with him. I says, all right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a key cut from Mercedes, and I might not be able to detain him or arrest him, but I'm getting that fucking car back. So I'm going to get a key cut from Mercedes, and I'll go and steal his car in the middle of the night. I'll have the insurance company pick it up. He goes, no, you're going to start an international incident. He goes, this is what I'm going to do. This is the guy from the State Department. He goes, I'm going to have her come in. I'm going to tell her it's a misunderstanding and ask her to surrender the car. He goes, more than likely she will. He goes, there's only like 2 or 3 diplomats from that island. She's not going to want to lose her thing, because if we pitch a bitch, they'll kick her out of her diplomat spot and send someone else. I said, all right. So while we're setting that up, I find out that, yes, the car was stolen in a home invasion in France, and an insurance company owns it and wants this thing back. It was like the car didn't what do you call line up with our EPA regulations. It was like a 12-cylinder, it's like a $90,000 Mercedes, but it's not allowed in the United States. But because they're diplomats, nobody gives a shit.
Yeah.
So we set up this meeting at over by the World Trade Center in the State Department office, and she shows up. Couldn't have been nicer. And she's not the woman I saw with him in the Mercedes dealership. And she's like, I'm so sorry. My husband does a lot of international deals. I'm sure he had nothing to do with this. She hands me the keys. Please take the car. I don't want a problem. I go, is your husband around? And she goes, no, unfortunately, he's out of the country on business, blah, blah, blah. I said, all right. So I said, okay, I get the car back. That's all ultimately I wanted. So the insurance company comes. They take the car like the day I got it. And it's like within a week in a container going back to France. I'm like, great. So about a month later, I get a phone call at the office, and one of my friends says, there's some English jerk off on the phone carrying on. He wants to talk to you. I said, all right, put him through. So I get on the phone, and the guy is like, you took my car and blah, blah, blah. And it's the guy from the Mercedes dealership. And what it is the wife probably laid into him, and now he's on the phone with her, probably standing in the background, pounding his chest. I'm going to take legal action. You had no right to take a diplomat's vehicle. My wife might let you get away with that. You took advantage of her, just like laying into me. And I'm letting him go. And then finally I go, let me ask you a question. I said, did your girlfriend have the baby? You could have heard a fucking pin drop. And he goes, what? I said, yeah. I said, the girl that you were in the Mercedes dealership, you know who I'm talking about, the young one, chinchilla coat, very pregnant. He goes, thank you, detective. And he got off the phone. So that was the last I ever heard of that fucking guy.
Oh, that's crazy. A question real quick about those VIN numbers, and then I do want to touch on 9/11 for a minute, because you mentioned that. When I was in high school, probably like my senior year, there was this guy, before tattooing got legalized in South Carolina, there's always that guy that people know that does tattoos underground. When at that point, like I said, it wasn't legalized. And we was over, some buddies of mine were getting some tattoo work done, and I was over there at his house, and I was waiting on them to get it done. I walk outside, and I see this nice, like, Mitsubishi Galant. Like, at the time, it was a pretty decent car. And I was like, that's a nice car out there. He's like, you want to buy it? And I'm like, well, how much? And he's like, $800. And I'm just like, damn, has it got an engine? Like, what's it? He's like, no, it's stolen. I was like, stolen? And he was like, yeah. He said, it's been a while. He said, it's off the hot list. He's like, I don't really drive it. He said, I might shoot to the store every now and then. He's like, all you got to do is just switch the VIN plates in the dash. And I'm just like, well, I got to believe there's probably something more to it than that. Otherwise, that seems pretty damn simple. Now, this was in the 2000s. I graduated 2001. So this was, had to be 2000, maybe 99. I can't remember exactly. But I'm sure there's a lot more details to track down a car other than that one VIN you see in the fucking dash.
Oh yeah, I mean, depending on the vehicle, you have engine numbers, transmission numbers, frame numbers. I mean, I don't want to give away too many secrets, but
Right.
yeah, there's a bunch of hidden numbers, and sometimes it's not a full VIN number. Sometimes it's just a random number that if you cross reference to a certain database, will give you the true identity of that car.
Wow. So that's a lot easier. It's a lot harder than people think to just do that. I mean, I've seen that in movies where they, they would take one and from a junkyard or whatever,
Yeah,
get the VIN
salvage
number
car,
off
right?
that, swap over to a new car. And I mean, you would on the obviously that's movies too. So in the movies it makes sense, but when there's 14 other identifying numbers on the car, that's going to raise a red flag too. When your VIN number and your dash is good, but the VIN number, somewhere else that they don't know about, and that's got to be like heart sinking to where somebody like you, like if I'm driving that car and I know what it is, I'm thinking, okay, he'll check the VIN and the dash, I'm all good. Well, then you start checking other places like up under the hood. That's got to be the
Yeah,
biggest oh shit moment
you
somebody
could
would ever
just
have.
tell by the look in the person's
Yeah.
face. And some people don't know. Some people will buy a secondhand car and have no idea. But the vast majority of people that buy these cars do know. And the person that sells it to them tells them, don't bring it to the dealership because if they plug that fucking thing in the computer, it's going to set off alarms. Or don't, bring it to a mechanic that's not going to ask too many questions. Or
Right.
when you're ready to get rid of this car, it's either got to go to a junkyard or another relative that knows the deal.
Right. So now you said 9/11. You actually were there, or not necessarily there, but like close by, and you actually had what possibly could have been a close call with that if somebody hadn't been running late. You said.
Yeah, on 9/11 was a Tuesday. I had court that day. My office was in the Bronx. I had court in Lower Manhattan that day. I had locked up a guy for a couple of stolen cars with changed VIN numbers. He was going to flip. He was going to become a confidential informant and give us a guy in a DMV that was pumping out driver's licenses. So that morning, I was supposed to set up a meeting with his defense attorney, the district attorney, me and my sergeant. We're going to work out a cooperation agreement. So I started my shift at 7 a.m. I was supposed to be in Lower Manhattan by 9 a.m. My sergeant shows up at 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, come on, it's going to take us an hour to get down there and find parking. We're going to be late. We're going to piss off the DA. He's farting around the office. Yeah, 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 yeah. Next thing you know, one of the cops from downstairs comes running into my office and says, put on the television set, a plane hit the World Trade Center. So you got to remember, you got three major airports around New York City area, not including smaller airports like Teterboro. So the first thing I thought of is like probably a private pilot had a heart attack and hit the side of the World Trade Center. So we're watching it unfold, and here comes the second plane. I'm like, oh shit. Now, obviously, now we know it's terrorism. Call came from downtown, everybody getting uniform standby. And by 1:30, I mean, we drove down, went down the west side, parked our car, and we were down there walking around. I mean, it was like something out of a horror movie.
Oh, I can't imagine. I've done a few episodes for we just had the anniversary pass, and I interviewed one guy, Eric Ronigan, who was in one of the towers. I think he was one of the last documented people out of the second tower to fall. And I mean, his story was crazy. And then we interviewed another firefighter who had a similar story to like that. They were scheduled to go down there, but I guess like when they leave, they have an address of where they're supposed to be going to. Somebody's in charge of like getting the address of where they're supposed to be going to. Well, apparently, I guess he read it wrong. So they went to the wrong spot where they were supposed to be meeting. And then once they realized, I was like, oh shit, I read it wrong. I got to go there. Well, like they're almost pulling up. Well, they did pull up. And they're walking in, and he's like, I distinctly remember seeing bodies just everywhere and wondering, like, what happened. He's like, then they're just hitting the ground in front of me. It was people jumping. And
Yeah.
he said, I held my head down because I didn't want to see it. And he said, all of a sudden, I just felt a hand just grab me and yank me back and say, run. The second tower come down. And he's like, had we not went to the wrong place originally, they would have more than likely been inside
Right.
that second tower.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. I was just a couple of blocks away. Had we been running on schedule, we
Yeah.
probably would have rushed over there to help with getting people out of there, and more than likely, I probably would have perished.
Yeah. What I mean, I remember that day, like you said, like it was yesterday. It was crazy, and I mean, just I was the same way. I woke up. My sister had called me and woke me up, and she was like, "You need to turn on the TV." She's like, "Somebody just hit the World Trade Center," and I was like, yeah, "It's pretty damn early. You shouldn't be drinking this early." I didn't know what she was talking about, and then I seen the smoke. Well, about the time that I was watching it, like you said, I seen the second one hit. So then it was like, "Holy cow!" And then everybody's glued to it, and then you see him fall. I mean, it was just it's definitely the worst thing I've ever seen, I think, in my lifetime. And hopefully it, I won't see anything even nowhere near close as that as, going forward. Were you around when the first bombing happened in the basement?
1993, I think that was. I was working that day. I think it was a Friday. I did not go down there. I was in plain clothes up in the Bronx that day working, but I wasn't mobilized and sent down there that day. But no, like I said, I was down there on 9/11. I mean, we were walking down, I think it was Broadway, and everything was just covered in that white toxic dust. And the sunlight, it was like a twilight. It was broad daylight. Like the sunlight had difficulty penetrating the particles.
Mm-hmm.
And all they had was like those bullshit plastic masks you put on your face. Like if you could buy at Home Depot if you're going to demo your bathroom.
Yeah.
And it was fairly obvious, like it wasn't safe to be down there, but that's what you sign up for. And I remember walking down Broadway, everything is covered in that white film. And I'll never forget, I just saw thousands upon thousands of women's high heel shoes all over the place because women that were fleeing were running in their shoes, took their heels off, and just left them.
Mm-hmm.
And like I know I've said this before, I'll say it again. When we got up to the trade center, we got like up to the pile. It was like that last scene in Planet of the Apes when Charlton Heston sees like the Statue of Liberty head on the beach. I mean, it was the facade of the trade center that had fallen hundreds of feet, just stuck in the ground. And we were like, I mean, by that point, my NYPD career had 13, 14 years, and I had seen a lot of terrible things, but like, I almost felt like a child. Like, I couldn't comprehend what I was looking at. Like, is this really like, if your mind is trying to tell yourself, this is, you're not dreaming, you're like, you got to pitch yourself. Like, this is really happening.
Yeah, that's great. I can't imagine people that was like their first day or first week on the job experiencing something
They
like
did have a lot of rookies. It's funny because one of the guys that I worked with later on in my career, yeah, he was a rookie cop.
wow. Yeah, I mean that would have to be a crazy thing to endure, especially with that might make people change career paths. I mean,
I'm sure I don't know anybody that left as a result of that, but I'm sure it happened. I mean, with a department that large, I'm sure some people said, you know what, this is enough for me.
yeah, and then also too, I talked with his name was Eric Ronigan, and when they built the tower back, I was just like, I don't know if I could go back to work in a tower like that. I mean, obviously you think, all right, well, there's going to be more security, more this, more that. Would they try the same thing again? But I was just like more than just like remembrance of everything that you went, even if you realized it would never happen again, even if you have that assurance, which you don't. I think it would just be the reliving it over and over, having to go up there, what you went. I don't know if I could do that.
Well, I think it would always be in the back of your head, like
yeah,
they tried 2 times to get this thing. Are they coming back for a third?
yeah,
You know what I mean? Like, I mean, in the back of your head.
yeah. And the guy that done the first time, Ramsey Youssef, I think he's out there in that Colorado
Yeah,
Supermax.
he's in the Supermax.
Yeah, with some of the worst of the worst out there. What Kaczynski and
Yeah, I saw a documentary. I think it was the old warden there, and he said he was probably like the most cunning of any individual that's been out there. And supposedly Ramsey Youssef is converted to Christianity, and the guy says, "I don't believe him for a second."
no, hell no, nobody that pulls something like that off. One other story you told, and it was funny because it was you always see movies. There's more movies and TV shows, I believe, about cops than anything, and obviously we know a lot of them are fabricated. Nobody solves crimes as quite as fast as they do. If anybody knows anything about the legal system, it drags ass, and I'm talking about years. And these people solve these cases in 45 minutes, take out commercials. But one of the things is a lot of actors will like ask to follow cops or shadow cops to try to get mannerisms down. Much like you were talking about earlier, cops do have a certain way they put their hand on their gun, like the butt of their gun. I don't know if it's just natural instinct or taught that or what, but actors will try to do that to emulate that. And you had a funny story about Harvey Keitel following some people one day, and I got a kick out of that.
Okay, I don't know if this is true. This was told to me by a cop that worked in the first precinct, which is Lower Manhattan. That's the precinct's right around the corner from the firehouse where they filmed Ghostbusters. Remember Ghost? Okay, so that's the
Yeah.
first precinct area. It's Lower Manhattan. We had these guys that were stealing cars and motorcycles down there. So they sent the auto crime division with these plainclothes cops in the first precinct. And this is the story told to me. I don't know it to be true. So Harvey Keitel, if you listen to this podcast, don't call me a bullshit audit. This is what I was told. Keitel lives down or stays around by Tribeca, and occasionally he'll show up at the precinct and he'll see a couple of cops. He goes, "You mind if I ride with you guys?" Now, who the fuck is going to tell Harvey Keitel no?
Yeah, no.
You know what I mean? Like, I would. I wouldn't care how much trouble I was going to get into. That's Harvey. That's the wolf from Pulp Fiction. You know what I mean? Harvey Keitel can get in the backseat of my radio car anytime. As the story was told to me, he'd get in the car, he'd ride around for a couple hours, and from what I was told one time, they went on a domestic call, and they're in this apartment, and it's two cops, a husband and wife fighting, and Harvey Keitel, and the guy is like arguing with his wife, and then he just stops and goes, "What the fuck is Harvey Keitel doing in here?" And he says, like, Harvey's cool. And he said that, like, after a while, Harvey looked at his watch. He goes, "Guys, can you take me back to the precinct?" And they're like, "Yeah, sure, Mr. Keitel." They take him back.
Almost kind of reminds me of that scene of Something About Mary at the end when everybody's kind of figuring out that everybody's got the crush on her. And then Ben Stiller brings Brett Favre in.
What the fuck is Brett Favre doing here?
Like, what the fuck is Brett Favre doing here?
That's the story that was told to me, and I thought it was great.
Oh, yeah. When I heard it today, I cracked up. I'm getting over a cold, so that's why I'm coughing. But that was a funny one. Now, you've got another one that I thought was pretty hilarious where you have to go to the bathroom to take care of a little business, and you have some run-in with some punks in there. Tell us a little bit about that one, because I got a kick out of that one.
So it's the early '90s. My partner and I. There's more to the story, but I'll give you bare bones.
Now, how fresh were you on the force before you started? How fresh were you?
How old was I when I joined?
Well, no, how fresh were you on the force with this story? Like, how many years?
Probably about 5 years, 4 or 5 years. My partner and I stopped. No, you know what? Maybe 3 or 4. My partner and I stop an unlicensed cab, and in the back seat, there's 3 guys, and they're passing around a shopping bag. Bag tears open. There's 4 kilos of coke. So we're like, it's like hitting the fucking lottery. We call it in the NYPD when you make an arrest with kilos. You call it the kilo fairy. So we take the guys out of the car, we recover the coke, we bring them into the station house, and it's like I won the fucking Stanley Cup. I'm parading around with the coke. Guys are coming up, taking photos of me. People are, blowing smoke up my ass. "You're going to go to the narcotics division. This is great." I'm pounding my chest. Later on, I get done with the paperwork. The coke goes to the lab. The bad guys go down to Bronx Central booking. That night, I got to meet with a district attorney to file charges. I got to tell her who, what, where, when, and why. She's got to determine if I had probable cause to stop the car, blah, blah, blah. So the Bronx courthouse area is in a shitty neighborhood. And after about 5 o'clock, all the businesses closed down. So there's no place really to eat. But about 6 months before, they had opened up this brand new food court across the street from the courthouse. So I'm like, great, I'm going to get something decent to eat, and then I'll talk to this district attorney. I go into the food court. I get some chicken parmesan and spaghetti. I'm sitting there in uniform. I'm all pumped up. I'm feeling good about myself. Next thing I know, my stomach goes. I'm like, oh, man, I got to take a shit. Now, the bathroom in the courthouse is like a fucking dungeon, and there's never toilet paper in there. And have any cop on and asked about that. So I said, wow, this food court's got a brand new bathroom. It's probably going to be like a fucking cathedral in there. So I go into the men's room. It's brand new. It's clean. It's like no one's ever taken a dump in this fucking place before. No one's in there. I go into the stall. I take off my gun belt and I hang it on the hook facing me inside the stall. I drop my pants. I sit on the ball. I'm getting ready for liftoff, and I hear the front door of the bathroom kick open. When 4 or 5 fucking teenagers come in, they're fucking roughhousing, throwing each other into the walls. They're cursing. They're hitting the hand dryers. They're turning on the sinks. I'm like, shit. Yeah, I'm in uniform, but I got my fucking pants down to my knees. I'm kind of vulnerable. I'm like, I better fucking finish up and get the fuck out of here. Suddenly it gets quiet. So I go, what the fuck? Did they leave? Did they see a pair of legs and knock off their bullshit? Something told me to look up. I'm sitting on the bowl. I look up. One of the kids went into the next stall, jumped up on top of the toilet. He's hanging over the wall trying to grab my gun belt. I said, oh shit. So with my left hand, I jump up and try to pull my pants up. With my right hand, I grab him around the neck and I pull him. When I pull him, I inadvertently bring him closer to my gun belt. He grabs my fucking gun belt with both hands. Now I let go of my pants with my left hand. They drop to my knees, and it's a hockey fight. I'm just hitting him. Let go, let go, let go. As I'm punching the shit out of him, his friends run into the next stall. They grab his legs, and now they're pulling him over the wall. Like, I can't lose his fucking gun belt. You know what I mean? So I'm like, I'm in the fight of my life. He's getting all sweaty. The shirt's tearing. He lets go of the gun belt. It hits the floor. They drag him over the side of the wall, and the wall bends like bucks, right? I hear them running out. I pull up my pants. I put on my gun belt. I go charging out into the food court. He's fucking gone. There's like a 300-pound porter with a Sony Walkman buffing the floor. I run up to him. Poppy, Poppy, stop. He stops, takes off the earphones. I go, did you see a bunch of teenagers in here? I don't see nothing. So like I write in the book, what was I supposed to do at this point? Call the police on myself? Whoever would have showed up, I would have been the laughing stock of the Bronx. Like,
oh yeah, that'd have broke your ball something serious.
There's 12 NYPD precincts in the Bronx, and everybody at one time or another meets at the courthouse. Everybody's like, you see that guy over there? He almost lost his gun belt taking his shit. So I kept that story to myself until I wrote the book. That's the opening story in my book, NYPD Law and Disorder.
Because losing your gun and shit, that's a huge deal with the NYPD. That gets you in a lot of trouble.
You just lost 30 vacation days and you're put on a year of disciplinary probation.
Holy shit. You had a story about a guy that, well, he didn't necessarily lose his gun, but he basically tried to cook, or forgot and tried to cook the damn thing, didn't
he? Yeah, well, the guy we worked with, he lived in a shitty neighborhood. He was going out drinking one night. He didn't want to take his gun with him, and he thought he'd hide his gun in the one place no one would look, with his oven. Goes out, 4 hours, 9 beers later, comes home, lick it up. He's hungry, wants to make some frozen pizzas, preheats the oven to 425 or whatever, goes inside the living room, starts channel surfing. The fucking gun heats up, the rounds in the gun heat up, and the next thing you know, the rounds start going off in the stove. He's got to crawl out of his fucking house on his hands and knees and call 911. His gun's shooting at him through the kitchen. Emergency service had to show up. The gun blew up into pieces and he needed a new stove.
Wow. There was a story down here. One of the lawyers, I know a lawyer who lives in my neighborhood, and he said there was this place in Columbia or Lexington where the police went in and took a lot of guns from this guy. I don't know if they were illegal guns or they wasn't sure if he had license for them or something. But anyways, they commandeered a lot of his guns. And I guess they were stacking a lot of them on the counter as they were, taking them out, where I guess some of the cartridges had fell out of the box or out of the holster or whatever that, they had them in. One of them rolled down into the stove and they didn't know about it. So this is like weeks later, maybe days, I'm not sure exactly, but he, goes to fire up the stove and then it's just like pop, pop, pop. And once they, took apart the stove and figured out what it was, they actually linked it back and they put a case on him. It was a serious lawsuit that they had where I don't know, misconduct or whatever you would call it, but they found out in the stove. And I mean, like, could have killed him. I mean, could have killed that guy you're talking about too.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Well, Vic, man, I've had a fun time talking on this podcast. You're a great storyteller as well. And I've had fun, man. People, tell everybody where they can go to find your books, because you got a lot of great stuff here.
Yeah, all my books are on Amazon. So just go to Amazon, go to the book section and type in my name, Vic, V-I-C, Ferrari, F-E-R-R-A-R-I. I've got 6 books, 4 of which are NYPD based. And they're all $10 paperbacks. They make great Christmas gifts. They're about 225 to 240 pages long. There's no beginning, end on any of my books. There's just a chapter with short stories of things that happened in my NYPD career. And, and $2.99 ebook download, like on Kindle or Kindle Unlimited.
Right. Okay. Any social medias they can go follow you on?
Yeah, I do. If you want to get a hold of me, just on Twitter and Instagram, it's at Vic Ferrari 50.
Vic Ferrari 50, definitely. We will give you a follow here from Crime and Entertainment for sure, because I've had a blast on this podcast, man. Hopefully have you back one day, man. We'll tell some more stories, because you're awesome storyteller.
I appreciate it. Next time, if you want, ask me about, I got so many stories, and I think what you would like is I got a chapter in one of my books called Rubbing Elbows, and it's famous people I ran into in my NYPD career, like
Oh,
helped
yeah.
a couple of them out and stuff. So I think you get a kick out of that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm gonna pick up. I just actually learned about you a couple weeks ago, and right now I'm a welder man, and I'm working like 12-hour shifts, so I don't have a whole lot of time to read a lot of stuff. I can just listen to podcasts and stuff like that. That's how I do a lot of my research. So if it's not on Audible, it's hard for me to actually find the time to sit down and read, a book. But it seems like what you've got is something that you don't necessarily need to follow along. It's just individual stories, and I think that would be something that I could probably blow through. And it sounds, I mean, I got a kick out of listening to him today. I've got a kick out of this podcast, so it sounds like definitely something I'm gonna check out for sure.
Yeah, they make great travel or beach books. It's not heavy reading. It's just you pick
Right.
it up and you'll go crossing over the dark side. It's corruption stories or rubbing elbows. It's stories about me bumping into famous people or embarrassing moments, like me trying to take a dump and me almost losing my gun belt.
Yeah, and I mean, New York just seems like it breeds great content. I mean, sometimes be it bad, like people say a lot of stuff about Dowd, but Dowd is owned up to a lot of his shit. But there's two other cops that went to jail. They were basically working for Gas Pipe Casso, Stephen Caracappa and Louis Ippolito. I mean, they were literally doing hits for the fucking mob, and it seems like they kind of get forgotten about. Or I think one of them did die, but the other one's still in prison.
No, they both died.
Oh, they're both dead now?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know both of them were dead. But I mean, there's so many good movies that could just come out of the NYPD alone. Like, I don't know how Dowds is in a movie or a TV show right now. I met him a couple weeks ago, or about a month ago in New York. I actually got a chance to meet him. And he said that his life rights are optioned, but they have like till March, I think, of this coming year, 2023, to start on it. And if they don't, then he gets his rights back. But that movie needs to be made. I think they could probably do a movie or a series on the mafia cops as well. Because the one funny thing about Louis Ippolito is he was almost, in my opinion, begging to get caught, because he was actually in Goodfellas. Matter of fact, he played Fat Andy in the scene in Goodfellas where they're going around the restaurant. Yeah.
He was in a scene in Casino too.
Oh, was he? I didn't know that.
Yeah, remember in Casino when De Niro has that big guy thrown out, the guy with the cowboy hat, he's got his feet up on the bar. He's one of the guys that grabs him and throws him out of the bar.
Wow. I didn't know that. I knew he was in Goodfellas because, matter of fact, the guy we spoke of earlier, Anthony Ruggiano Jr.
You should ask him if he knows him or of him.
Oh, yeah, he did. Well, that's it. He knew that he played his father in the movie. He said when they all went to sing Goodfellas, back in the day, it's like everybody was kind of turning around and looking at him. He's like, that's your father, because he didn't know he was going to be in, like, talk about him in the movie.
Right, Fat Andy.
Yeah. So that's cool, man. But I think it's just, there's so many good stories that's in New York that I think just needs to be made. And you're talking cops, criminals. I mean, obviously, we talked a little bit about the mob. They've got a ton of good mob movies that's coming out and that's already out. I mean, it's like New York is the endless pot of great content in one way or another.
There's just, you know what it is? There's so much going on in New York. I mean, from mobsters to cops. It's just, you just see so much, and so much outrageous stuff happens. Like, there's a story in one of my opening book. My partner and I were in Penn Station, and we're in a coffee place in Penn Station, and we're sitting at a table, and there's an opaque tile ceiling above us, and there's a rat, and it's just running around in circles. And I'm like, I think it's dying. And my partner and I are betting the over-under when this thing is going to die. The fucking rat. Now, I'm not making this really happen. The rat, Penn Station, full of people. The rat dies. The two guys come from behind the counter. They put a ladder right next to our table. Don't say a fucking word. Put a ladder next to our table. Another guy grabs a garbage can from out front and takes the plastic top off and puts it there. One guy goes on the ladder, takes the tile, moves it, slides it. This fucking rat about this bit right in front of us slides right into the garbage. The guy puts the top back on, and they put the garbage can to the front of the thing. And now my partner and I, maybe the rat will fucking wake up and bite somebody, and we're betting on that. Not excuse me, Jesus, you want another cup of coffee? We gotta close. There's a dead rat. And it was like a well-rehearsed chorus. Like this had happened before.
Oh, I'm sure it had.
Yeah, I think that's the beginning of my book, NYPD Through the Looking Glass. That's where it starts off of just you just roll with the punches.
And that's why, like, I love New York to visit. I mean, I think in a time I could have probably lived there at least for a short period of time, but I love going to visit. I mean, it's made for a guy like me. I like a lot going on. I like the fact that there's, 4 in the morning, you walk out and it's packed. And I love that, but you can always spot the people that it just really aren't prepared for what they're going to see. It's a different place, and it's not for everyone. And like, I remember I was walking down, and it was, like you said, those rats up there, man, they get fucking huge. They look like the size of house cats, some of them. And it come around the corner, and it startled me at first because I thought it was a cat. But then I realized what it was, so I kind of just sidestepped it. I'm not going to try to do
yeah,
it.
they scare the fuck out of you.
Yeah, they scared the shit out of me. And the people behind me, I mean, they screamed. You would have thought somebody was stabbing them to death as loud as they screamed, and took off running. I mean, the damn thing was so big it might have had a gun. Hell, I don't know. But it's funny to watch people that are really out of their element down there just because it's a culture shock.
Definitely.
Well, Vic, man, I've had a blast on this show. I'll definitely have you back on, man. Everybody, if you want to check out his books, we'll put him a link down in the description below in our show notes. Go follow him on social media as well. He's been a fantastic guest. I'm sure you'll love these books if you love this podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Hollywood Wade. This was Vic Ferrari, and unfortunately, we are out of time. So tune in next week for an all-new episode of Crime and Entertainment. Vic, we appreciate you, my friend.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, too.
Thank you.